A very good evening to all our viewers and welcome to this Sunday's edition of Primetime News coming to you live from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. I'm Arundhati Mudanayaka. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines this evening.
Nicolas Maduro and wife taken to a U.S. detention center. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez appointed as interim president of Venezuela.
Not sure that you'll ever...
U.S. to oversee Venezuelan governance until a safe and legal transition of power takes place, says President Trump.
Nicolas Maduro.
We will not become anyone's colony, Venezuelan Vice President says while assuming interim governance. United Nations expresses deep concern over the U.S. operation targeting Venezuela. Minister of Foreign Affairs explains Sri Lanka's stance on the Venezuelan crisis.
සජාතික සංවිධානයේ මහා මණ්ඩලය තුල මේ මූලික ප්‍රඥප්ති වලට පටහැනිව ප්‍රතිපත්ති වලට මූලධර්ම වලට පටහැනිව කටයුතු කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගත යුතු වෙනවා. ඒක තමයි ප්‍රස්තාවය.
Internal committee report released regarding the controversial grade 6 English module. Rainfall to increase in northern, eastern and Uva provinces from tomorrow.
Now the story is in detail. Operation Absolute Resolve, an American military operation that upended the control of an entire country within just a few hours, has now become a major topic of global discussion. Newsfirst, Hashini Patrone is ready with more details to bring you the latest updates on the US intervention in Venezuela.
The United States launched a massive military operation against Venezuela just yesterday. Now, after his arrest in Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro was flown out of Caracas on a US helicopter and taken aboard the USS Iwo Jima. He was then taken to New York via Cuba. After arriving in New York, he was taken to the offices of the US Drug Enforcement Administration, also known as DEA. As of now, Maduro has since been transferred from the DEA office in Manhattan to Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center. Now, according to latest foreign media reports, the Venezuelan president is expected to appear at the Manhattan Federal Court on drugs and weapons charges, which could happen as soon as tomorrow.
What happened to Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro? US President Donald Trump has announced that after a massive military assault on Venezuela, United States forces have captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. President Trump said that Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were captured and flown out of the country early Saturday morning as part of a large-scale US military strike in Venezuela. According to reports, Maduro and his wife were first taken aboard the US warship USS Iwo Jima during the operation before being transported to the United States. US officials say Maduro and Flores were then flown to New York, where they were detained at Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center. They're expected to face federal charges, including alleged drug trafficking and related crimes. The Metropolitan Detention Center is the only federal jail in New York City and is notorious for handling many high-profile cases, including the rapper R. Kelly, Jeffrey Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell, and most recently, Sean Diddy Combs. What else about this attack has not yet been revealed. At around 1:50 a.m., US President Donald Trump gave the mission the go-ahead. Accordingly, the US military operation began in the early hours with a series of strikes on key military installations in and around Caracas, signaling a dramatic escalation in tensions between the two nations. Air, ground, space, maritime and intelligence personnel coordinated over a period of months to plan this mission. Following the massive strikes that lasted nearly 90 minutes, U.S. forces acted to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores. After being taken into custody of the U.S. military, the couple were then held aboard the USS Iwo Jima. Overall, from the moment of their capture to their transfer to the United States, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife were transported over a distance of approximately 3,300 kilometers.
Numerous international media outlets have now reported key details about the US operation in Venezuela. The military operation, named Operation Absolute Resolve, was carried out by one of America's elite military units, the Delta Force. Now, this unit has previously taken part in high-profile operations, including Operation Red Dawn, targeting Saddam Hussein, Operation Kayla Muller to capture ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and Operation Gothic Serpent in 1993 in Somalia, aimed at apprehending local leaders.
What is this Delta Force that carried out the military operation in Venezuela? The Delta Force is one of the United States' most elite special operations units. Officially known as 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, it specializes in counterterrorism, hostage rescue and high-value target operations. The unit is trained for high-risk precision missions anywhere in the world, often operating covertly or behind enemy lines. Delta Force has participated in many well-known operations, including Operation Red Dawn, capturing Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Operation Kayla Muller, targeting ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Operation Gothic Serpent, 1993 mission in Somalia to capture key leaders. Accordingly, Delta Force is the tip of the spear for US special operations, highly trained, highly secretive and deployed only for the most critical missions. And what is Operation Absolute Resolve? A series of details are emerging about the US military operation that captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores. According to reports, the operation, codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, was planned over several months by US defense and intelligence agencies. US President Donald Trump reportedly authorized the mission on the 2nd of January 2026. Air, ground, space, maritime and intelligence personnel coordinated over a period of months to plan this operation. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time on the 2nd of January, US President Donald Trump gave the mission the go-ahead. Operation Absolute Resolve saw 150 aircraft launched towards Venezuela from 20 different bases across the Western Hemisphere. An extraction force made up of helicopters and a ground team approached Maduro's compound in Venezuela at 2:01 a.m. local time on the 3rd of January to capture the leader and his wife. The force was protected overhead by F-22, F-35, FA-18, EA-18, E-2 aircraft, B-1 bombers and drones. Helicopters came under fire and one was hit, although it remained flyable during the rest of the mission. Maduro and his wife embarked on the USS Iwo Jima at some time after 3:39 a.m. Eastern Time. President Trump, along with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, monitored the operation live from the White House, with several photos released showing them observing the mission. According to Trump, he had contacted Maduro a week prior, urging him to surrender, and the capture site was heavily fortified, described as a reinforced steel stronghold. US forces reportedly located the site with intelligence provided by a CIA informant within the Venezuelan government.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro rose to power under the leadership of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, or PSUV, and following the era of leftist leader Hugo Chavez. A former bus driver and a trade union leader, Maduro assumed the presidency after Chavez and held office from 2013 onwards. Now, during the 26 years in which Chavez and Maduro governed, their party consolidated control over major institutions, including the National Assembly, large parts of the judicial system, and the Electoral Council. And in 2024, Maduro was declared the winner of the presidential election, although opposition figures reported that Edmundo Gonzalez had secured a majority of votes following restrictions on opposition participation. However, opposition leader Maria Corina Machado was barred from running and Gonzalez was nominated in her place. Machado, recognized for efforts to peacefully and democratically transition Venezuela from authoritarianism, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in October 2024. However, after months in hiding, she traveled to Oslo in December to receive the award despite a travel ban. She has stated that returning to Venezuela would put her at risk of arrest by government authorities, who consider her a fugitive. Now, within hours, the U.S. operation captured President Maduro and his wife, prompting the White House to hold a press briefing to outline future U.S. measures regarding Venezuela. Now, during the briefing, President Donald Trump highlighted two key points that drew global attention. Let's take a look.
If you would have seen what I saw last night, you would have been very impressed. I'm not sure that you'll ever get to see it, but it was an incredible thing to see. Not a single American service member was killed, and not a single piece of American equipment was lost. We had many helicopters, many planes, many people involved in that fight. But think of that, not one piece of military equipment was lost, not one service member was, more importantly, killed. The United States military is the strongest and most fearsome military on the planet by far. With capabilities and skills our enemies can scarcely begin to imagine. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. There's no equipment like what we have, and you see that even if you just look at the boats. You know, we've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by sea, and those drugs mostly come from a place called Venezuela. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not. The first wave, if you'd like to call it that, the first attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually. This was pinpoint, but we have a much bigger wave that probably won't have to do. This partnership of Venezuela with the United States of America, a country that everybody wants to be involved with because of what we were able to do and accomplish, will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and safe. And it will also make the many, many people from Venezuela that are living in the United States extremely happy. They suffered. They suffered. So much was taken from them. They're not going to suffer anymore. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solas, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans, the many, many Americans. Hundreds of thousands over the years of Americans died because of him. Maduro and his wife will soon face the full might of American justice and stand trial on American soil. Right now, they're on a ship they'll be heading to, ultimately, New York. and then a decision will be made, I assume, between New York and Miami or Florida. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solas, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans, the many, many Americans. Hundreds of thousands over the years of Americans died because of him. Maduro and his wife will soon face the full might of American justice and stand trial on American soil.
No other country on planet Earth, and it's not even close, could pull this kind of operation off. And no other president has ever shown this kind of leadership, courage, and resolve. The most powerful combination the world has ever seen.
This was an audacious operation that only the United States could do. It required the utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. And the word integration does not explain the sheer complexity of such a mission. After months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets, in early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise and minimize the harm to the indicted personnel so, as the president said, they could be brought to justice.
Donald Trump has once again shown his contempt for the Constitution and the rule of law. Let's be clear. The President of the United States does not have the right to unilaterally take this country into war, even against a corrupt and brutal dictator like Maduro. The United States does not have the right, as Trump stated this morning, to run Venezuela. Congress must immediately pass a war powers resolution to end this illegal military operation and reassert its constitutional responsibilities. Trump's attack on Venezuela will not make the United States and the world safer. Quite the contrary. This brazen violation of international law gives a green light to any country on earth that may wish to attack another nation to seize their resources or change their governments. This is the horrific logic of force that Putin used to justify his brutal attack on Ukraine. Trump and his administration have made it clear that they want to revive the Monroe Doctrine, a belief that claims that the United States has the right to dominate the affairs of the hemisphere. They have spoken openly about controlling Venezuela's oil reserves, the largest in the world. Let's make no mistake about it. This is rank imperialism. It recalls the darkest chapters of U.S. interventions in Latin America, which have left a terrible legacy. It will and should be condemned by the democratic world. Trump campaigned for president on an America First platform. He claimed to be the peace candidate. Well, at a time when 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, when our healthcare system is collapsing, when people throughout this country cannot afford housing, and when artificial intelligence threatens millions of jobs, it is time for the president to focus on the crises facing this country and end the military adventurism abroad. Trump is failing in his job to run the United States of America. He should not be trying to run Venezuela.
As the world watched the US operation in Venezuela with astonishment, the country has now begun to respond. Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has been ordered by the Supreme Court of Venezuela to assume the responsibilities of the interim presidency. Let's now deep dive into the current situation of Venezuela and the response of the people of Venezuela.
What is the response of Venezuela? Amid this ongoing crisis, Venezuela's Supreme Court has ordered Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to assume the duties of the interim president. The court ruling states that she will take charge of the presidency of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to ensure administrative continuity and broad national security. Speaking to the media in the context of the current crisis, Vice President Rodriguez emphasized that Nicolás Maduro remains the country's president. She also highlighted that her government is prepared to defend Venezuela against any external threats, including actions from the United States.
The only president of Venezuela, there is only one president in this country. His name is Nicolás Maduro Moro. And the decree has been signed. We are proceeding in this National Defense Council to deliver it to the President of the Supreme Court of Justice. For her due constitutional support in the Constitutional Chamber. All within the Constitution. We learned it from Comandante Chavez in the face of vicissitudes, in the face of coups d'état, in the face of oil sabotage. We are ready to defend Venezuela. We are ready to defend our natural resources that must be for national development.
What is the current situation in Venezuela? The US strikes in Venezuela have reportedly resulted in the deaths of over 40 people, including members of the Venezuelan military, according to international media reports. Satellite imagery released by global outlets shows significant damage to key military complexes in Caracas, including the Fuerte Tiuna compound, as well as other strategic locations across the country. Following the strikes, Starlink, owned by Elon Musk, took steps to provide free internet access to Venezuelan citizens, with the company announcing on social media that the service would be accessible without charge for those affected. In addition, the US Department of Transportation stated that it is taking measures to lift airspace restrictions around the Caribbean region, and airlines have been informed of these changes. The capture of President Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores has sparked divided reactions within Venezuela. Protests erupted in several cities, with groups calling for foreign forces to withdraw and end US involvement. Other citizens lined up to express support for Maduro and denounced the operation. Internationally pro-Maduro demonstrations have also taken place. In Paris, France, protesters voiced opposition to the US intervention. In Buenos Aires, Argentina, demonstrators held rallies in support of Venezuela and its government.
Following a period of prolonged silence in the immediate aftermath of the operation in Venezuela, the United Nations has finally issued an official response. A spokesperson for Secretary General Antonio Guterres conveyed the chief's deep concern regarding the US military intervention. To address the escalating crisis, the UN has also convened an emergency meeting just tomorrow. Now, the UN's reaction comes at a time when the world appears divided. Disagreements over power dynamics in the Northern Hemisphere are increasingly evident. Some major countries are closely scrutinizing the US operation, while the others have expressed support for the United States' actions.
What is the response of the United Nations? The United Nations remained silent for several hours following the Operation Absolute Resolve. Later, however, the UN spokesperson for Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated that the Secretary General is deeply alarmed by the recent escalation in Venezuela, culminating with today's United States military action in the country. He emphasized that, quote, independently of the situation in Venezuela, these developments constitute a dangerous precedent, unquote. The Secretary General continued to emphasize the importance of full respect by all of all international law, including the UN Charter. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council, with the support from Russia and China following a proposal led by Colombia, has called for an emergency meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation. What is the response of world leaders? President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, wrote on X that the actions cross an unacceptable line, adding, quote, "Attacking countries in flagrant violation of international law is the first step toward a world of violence, chaos and instability," unquote. He also called it a severe violation of Venezuela's sovereignty. In contrast, Argentine President Javier Milei praised the operation, expressing support for the US-backed government in Venezuela. President of Uruguay, Yamandu Orsi, stated that his country rejects any US military intervention. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer clarified that the United Kingdom was not involved in the operation and has had no discussions with the US President regarding it. French President Emmanuel Macron called for the 2024 president election opposition candidate Edmundo González to be elected as Venezuela's new president through a democratic process. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that while Maduro has caused devastation in Venezuela, the US intervention raises questions about violations of international law. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni noted that foreign military action is not a means to end authoritarian regimes, but that defending one's nation against attacks is lawful. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez stated that his country does not recognize Maduro's government. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign ministry urged the United States to reconsider its stance and release the sovereign Venezuela's democratically elected president and his wife. China's foreign ministry expressed strong condemnation of the US operation, warning against the United States' reckless use of power. Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV has expressed his concern today over the recent developments in Venezuela. According to a statement published by the Vatican, the Pope at the midday Angelus prayer has said, quote, "The good of the beloved Venezuelan people must prevail over every other consideration and lead us to overcome violence and to undertake paths of justice and peace, safeguarding the country's sovereignty, ensuring the rule of law enshrined in the Constitution, respecting the human and civil rights of each person and of all, and working to build together a serene future of collaboration, stability and concord, with special attention to the poorest who suffer because of the difficult economic situation," unquote. Speaking in the St. Peter's Square, Pope Leo invited everyone to pray for the Venezuelan people, assuring them of his own prayers.
Venezuela, a country that captured the attention of the world's powers in a single day, is home to the largest proven oil reserves on Earth. Its oil reserves surpass those of major oil-producing countries including Saudi Arabia, Iran, Canada, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Russia, the United States and even Libya.
Venezuela first came under Spanish colonial rule when Christopher Columbus arrived on its coast during his third voyage in 1498. The country gained full independence in 1830. After long periods of political instability, Venezuela discovered significant oil reserves at the beginning of the 20th century. By the mid-century, it had become one of the world's leading oil exporters, fueling rapid modernization and urbanization. Although a democratic government was established in 1958, the Bolivarian Revolution led by Hugo Chavez, who came into power in 1999, introduced socialist reforms that nationalized the country's oil wealth. Venezuela's oil-based economy later faced challenges due to international sanctions imposed by the United States. Following the death of Chavez in 2013, Nicolas Maduro assumed the presidency. Born in 1962, Maduro began his career as a bus driver. A member of the United Socialist Party, he served as a prominent union leader before being elected to the National Assembly in the year 2000. Under Hugo Chavez, Maduro served as the 24th vice president and from 2006 to 2012 as Minister of Foreign Affairs. He succeeded Chavez as president and took oath for a third term on the 10th of January 2025.
Ever since he took oaths for a third term, the United States has expressed strong opposition to Nicolas Maduro. US President Donald Trump blamed Maduro for the mass migration of hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans to the United States. In addition, Trump designated two Venezuelan criminal groups, Tren de Aragua and Cartel de los Soles, as foreign terrorist organizations or FTOs, stating that Cartel de los Soles operates under Maduro's direct direction. Now, Trump also increased the reward for information leading to Maduro's capture, raising it to several $1 million. Foreign media reported that Trump had plans to label Maduro's government as a foreign terrorist organization as well.
Why did Trump target Venezuela? The mass migration of hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans to the United States has been a central accusation against Nicolas Maduro. Since the economic crisis and repression that began in 2013, an estimated 8 million Venezuelans have fled the country, many of whom are now residing in the United States. However, no evidence has been presented to support Trump's claims that Maduro forced prisoners to leave jails or mental health institutions to migrate to the United States. Trump's stated primary goal has been to halt the flow of illegal drugs, including fentanyl and cocaine, into the United States. He designated two Venezuelan criminal groups, Tren de Aragua and Cartel de los Soles, as foreign terrorist organizations, accusing Maduro of directing the latter. Trump also increased the reward for information leading to Maduro's capture and announced plans to label Maduro's government as a foreign terrorist organization. Following the doubling of the reward, US forces began striking boats and ships traveling from Caribbean islands toward the United States from September, targeting vessels allegedly transporting drugs. The first strike took place on the 2nd of September 2025 in international waters, and it is estimated that over 110 people have died since then. In October, Trump authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations against Maduro, warning that attacks could continue against those he described as drug terrorists. Trump repeatedly stated that Maduro is not a friend of the United States and that removing him by force would be beneficial. To increase financial pressure on Maduro, a complete naval blockade was declared on all vessels carrying oil to and from Venezuela. US forces also deployed a large military presence across Caribbean islands. On the 24th of November 2025, the United States designated Maduro as a member of a foreign terrorist organization, further escalating tensions between the two countries.
Following the US seizure of the first Venezuelan fuel shipment off the country's coast, US President Donald Trump repeatedly claimed that his administration was using force to gain control over Venezuela's oil reserves. Now, Maduro, for his part, has long accused the US of attempting to take the country's resources by force. When reporters asked what would happen to the seized ship and its oil, Trump reportedly responded, quote unquote, "I think we are keeping the oil." However, US officials have previously rejected Venezuela's claims that these actions constitute an attempt to access oil reserves that are not intended for domestic use. Venezuela holds the world's largest estimated proven oil reserves, and revenue from the oil sector accounts for more than half of the government's budget. Nonetheless, the country's exports have been constrained by sanctions, lack of investment, and mismanagement of state-owned oil companies. According to the US Energy Information Administration, Venezuela produced only 0.8% of global oil output in 2023, currently exporting around 900,000 barrels per day, with China as its largest buyer. Meanwhile, Venezuela's Supreme Court has ruled that Delcy Rodriguez, who served as Maduro's vice president, should assume the interim presidency. Reuters reports that the court emphasized the move is necessary to ensure administrative continuity and national security. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino assured that the country's armed forces would continue to safeguard Venezuela's sovereignty. However, the US attacks came after Trump's administration sought to increase pressure on Maduro's government, citing Venezuela's alleged role in sending large amounts of drugs and members of criminal organizations, including cartels, into the United States.
Dr. Kalpa Rajapaksa, senior lecturer in the Department of Economics and Statistics at the University of Peradeniya, explained the motive behind the United States military operation against Venezuela.
If you look at the oil reserves in the world, Venezuela has a recorded number of oil reserves, which is actually goes around 300 billion barrels in total. And if you look at Saudi Arabia, which is actually the second, which holds the second position, is but the oil reserves that they have is around 320 billion barrels, and the US is far behind, which has around 50 billion barrels in oil reserves. Because Sri Lanka should support a movement that actually would not involve in state matters in the fashion that the US involved in yesterday and for a long time. So there were two things coming up. There were a couple of things coming up there were a couple of things happening, very significant things happening in the last couple of years. One thing that actually China and Russia wanted to happen is, for an example, now the global order is taking place in rule-based order. But what they are proposing is basically a law-based order, where actually all the countries have to obey a particular law and would not violate by any means. So Sri Lanka has a real challenge ahead, where Sri Lanka has to deal with deep economic problems, but at the same time we should not ignore the fact that there's a political sphere, there's a power sphere, global political order that we have to carefully tackle with.
Also, Minister of Foreign Affairs Vijitha Herath states that actions must be taken in a manner that protects a country's sovereignty in accordance with the United Nations Charter and international law.
වෙනිසුලාව අනේ කළා තියෙනවා. ඒතකොට ඔබතුමාලගේ ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් තිබුණා වෙනිසුලාවට අතට තබමු කියලා. මම රජයේ ස්ථාවරය දැනගන්න කැමතියි කෙටියෙන් මොකද්ද මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් කියලා.
එක්සත් ජාතීන්ගේ සංවිධානයේ ප්‍රඥප්ති වලට අනුකූලව ජාත්‍යන්තර නීති වලට
It is imperative to act in a manner that protects the sovereignty of a country in accordance with the United Nations Charter and international law. All member states of the United Nations are bound to uphold this. Accordingly, an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council has been convened for tomorrow. From our side, we are also urging for this process to be expedited. Consequently, action must be taken within the UN General Assembly regarding any conduct that contradicts these fundamental charters, policies and principles. That is our position.
Also, news overseas, protests against the rising cost of living in Iran are ongoing.
Protests are being held to express public anger over the severe depreciation of the Iranian rial against the US dollar. Foreign media reports that at least 8 people have been killed so far following clashes between protesters and security forces in several parts of the country. Last Sunday, merchants in the capital Tehran closed their businesses and took to the streets to protest the government's economic policies, a movement that subsequently spread nationwide. Protesters are calling for an end to the rule of Iran's supreme leader and a transition towards a democratic system. President Masoud Pezeshkian, considered a moderate, addressed the nation and appealed to the public to remain peaceful. President Pezeshkian urged the citizens to act calmly, stating that Iranian government is always ready to listen to the legitimate demands of the people.
In local news, a press conference was held at the Department of Government Information today to announce the government's stance on educational reforms.
Minister of Education, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, along with Ministers Vijitha Herath, Nalinda Jayatissa and Anuru Karunathilaka attended this press conference.
විශේෂයෙන්ම අපේ රජය බලයට පත් වෙනකොටත් අපි මේ රටේ ජනතාවට සහතික වුණා මේ අධ්‍යාපනය නවීන ලෝකයට නවීන
When our government came into power, we promised the people that we will reform the education system to suit the modern world and modern society. These reforms were introduced with the common goal of strengthening the future of the children of this country. It is a collective effort and a collective responsibility of the government. It is our policy and stance for the sake of the nation's children. Specifically, a serious error was included in a module related to the grade 6 syllabus. The Ministry of Education has now clearly observed this mistake. As soon as it was identified on the instructions of the Prime Minister, the Secretary appointed a fact-finding committee to gather internal data and information. We have now received that committee's report. Based on the report, legal action and further proceedings will be initiated against those responsible for the error. This is something that absolutely should not have been included in the grade 6 module. Therefore, the Ministry of Education has decided to remove it. We say to the parents of this country with great responsibility, we will never allow a flawed education system to be implemented by including misconceptions or the views raised by various individuals into these reforms. If a deficiency occurs, we will intervene and correct it and provide the children with a more positive system. As a government, we take collective responsibility for this.
මෙය වඩාත් සාධනීය මට්ටමින් දරුවන්ට ලබා දෙන්න අපි මැදිහත් වෙනවා රජයක් විදිහට සාමූහිකව අපි වගකීම ගන්නවා.
හෙට ආරම්භ වෙන නව අධ්‍යයන වර්ෂය තුල පළවෙනි ශ්‍රේණියේ දරුවන්ට ජනවාරි 29 වෙනිදා
In the new academic year starting tomorrow, we hope to introduce the new syllabus to grade 1 students on the 29th of January and to grade 6 students on the 21st of January. Beyond just introducing the syllabus, we have organized programs to familiarize children with this new system alongside the launch. We have also organized introductory programs for students. Similarly, we have provided training to the teachers who will implement this curriculum. So far, we have conducted 7,181 training of trainers or TOT programs within the system and have trained 132,580 teachers across the country. As soon as we identified the issue regarding that specific module, the first thing we did was to seal the modules held in our warehouses. We halted the distribution process to children. Following that, a 3-member fact-finding committee consisting of 3 senior additional secretaries of the ministry was appointed for a preliminary inquiry. They submitted their report within 2 days. Based on that report, we have planned a preliminary investigation as the next step. We intend to appoint retired Secretary Ranjit Ariyaratne to conduct this investigation. We are currently working to present this report and our proposal to the Board of Control of the National Institute of Education to obtain approval. Additionally, the NIE has already commenced its own internal investigation, which is currently underway.
ඒ වගේම ජාතික අධ්‍යාපන ආයතනය ඔවුන්ගේ අභ්‍යන්තර විමර්ශනයක් ආරම්භ කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒකත් දැනට ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා.
ඇත්තටම මේක කඩාකප්පල්කාරී ක්‍රියාවක් කියලා ඔබතුමිය හිතනවද?
ඒක අපිට දැනගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ CID එක කරන විමර්ශනය තුලින්. මම හිතන්නේ විමර්ශනයේ අනාතරේ මම ඒක පිළිබඳ නිගමනයක් දිය යුතු නැහැ. නමුත් අපිට සැකයක් තියෙනවා.
Dr. Harini Amarasuriya also clarified the government's plans regarding school digitalization.
මේ වෙනකොට අග්‍රාමාත්‍ය කාර්යාලය තුලින් අපි
We have already appointed a digital task force through the Prime Minister's office to implement the digitalization of the education system. This will be introduced this year. We have already begun digitalizing the entire education administration management system. We expect to introduce a formal policy on digitalization of education by March this year. We are moving forward with this process in a very planned manner to bring about structural changes across the entire system, specifically focusing on improving both infrastructure and human resources.
මේ පද්ධතිය තුල තියෙන යටිතල පහසුකම්ද මානව සම්පත දියුණු කිරීම සඳහාද අපි තාමත්ම සැලසුම් සහගතව මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය ඉදිරියට ගන්නේ.
The first school term for all grades except grades 1 and 6 will begin tomorrow. The Minister of Education said that several preparatory programs including school cleaning activities were carried out today.
The Ministry of Education stated that the first school term for grade 6 will commence on the 21st under the new education reforms. Only an introductory session for grade 1 students will take place from tomorrow. The first school term for grade 1 students will officially begin on the 29th of January. Meanwhile, a new circular has been issued to the academic staff of schools. Accordingly, the total number of periods a teacher is required to cover per week is 35. Teachers must be engaged in classroom teaching for at least 28 periods per week, excluding duty exemptions. Supervising teachers are required to teach a minimum of 14 periods per week. Assistant principals must teach at least 10 periods per week. The Ministry of Education also stated that deputy principals are required to cover a minimum of 8 periods per week.
The Department of Meteorology says an increase in rainfall is expected from tomorrow in the northern, eastern and Uva provinces. This is due to the influence of a disturbance in the lower atmosphere affecting Sri Lanka.
The Department of Meteorology warns that strong winds reaching up to 50 km per hour are possible in the eastern slopes of the Central Highlands, the northern, north central, northwestern and eastern provinces, as well as in the Hambantota, Gampaha, Colombo and Monaragala districts. The public is advised to take precautions against wind-related hazards. A national program to clean rivers and canals polluted by recent floods was launched today, with the main event held at Malvatoya in Anuradhapura. The program was organised by Sri Lanka Red Cross. District Secretary of Anuradhapura Ranjit Vimalasuriya, along with the group including the Mayor of the Anuradhapura Municipal Council, participated in the event. A cleaning program was carried out today on both banks of the Badula Oil under the Badula Oil to Husma initiative. The program was organised by the Badula Municipal Council, the Central Environmental Authority, the Disaster Management Centre and Sri Lanka Red Cross. Participants included members of the Army and Air Force as well as students from Uva Velasu University.
Newsfirst with the people.
Former transport manager of Satosa Indika Ratnamarala has been remanded until the 9th of January. This order was given after the suspect was produced before the Wattala Magistrates Court.
Former transport manager of Satosa Indika Ratnamalala was arrested last night by officers of the Financial Crimes Investigation Division while he was staying at a hotel in Galle. The arrest was made on charges of aiding and abetting the misappropriation of state property. Recently, Johan Fernando, the son of former Minister Johnston Fernando, was also arrested. He was taken into custody on charges of misappropriating state property, deliberately providing false information to mislead officials to obtain an ethanol license, defrauding the government of tax revenue and money laundering. Indika Ratnamalala, former Satosa transport manager, was arrested specifically on the charges of aiding and abetting these offences. The investigation is being carried out based on an anonymous complaint received by the Financial Crimes Investigation Division in November 2015 regarding a company operated at an address on Amrasekara Mawatha in Colombo.
Deputy Chief Organizer of the Samagi Jana Balawega SM Marika says that the unification of the United National Party and the Samagi Jana Balawega can by no means be prevented.
This country needs an alternative. An experienced team is required. We need a team that is not corrupt. An alternative force within the right-wing camp is essential. It is coming. The United National Party and the Samagi Jana Balawega will definitely unite. There is no argument about that. Even if you look here, you can see that old UNPers and new UNPers have all come together, specifically under the leadership of Sajith Premadasa. And by utilizing the support, knowledge and experience of Ranil Wickremesinghe, we have initiated the steps to bring a young team into power. Therefore, no matter what conspiracies the government hatches to sabotage this union cannot be stopped. Let the Podujana Peramuna and other factions go their own way because they have a separate identity and we have a separate identity. We are the true right-wingers. The government is now breaking into a cold sweat. We would like to today wasn't even a convention. Ranil Wickremesinghe just brought in candidates from Kaluthara and Colombo and conducted a small program. Your intention is to destroy and crush the SJB. Are we puppets to do as they say?
Meanwhile, SM Marika says that it has become a hassle for the people to fill out two separate applications to receive the relief payments of 25,000 rupees and 50,000 rupees provided to disaster victims.
ජනාධිපතිතුමා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඇවිල්ලා අර මේ නත්තල් කාලේට
The president came to parliament and announced a massive aid package, much like giving gifts or making promises during the Christmas season. However, when people returned home after being affected by floods and disasters, they should be able to receive the 25,000 rupees cleaning allowance without any hindrance. Since they have no source of income upon returning home, they have to fill out another form to get that 50,000 rupees for dry rations to survive. The village Grama Niladari knows how many houses there are and who lives in them. If the form was filled out the first time, the person receiving money to clean the house should also be given the money for dry rations. So why fill out another form again for the 50,000 rupees?
It hasn't even been 2 months since the floods. Yet, the issue currently bothering the opposition MPs is the requirement to fill out 2 application forms when distributing aid to flood victims. While MP Marika, who belongs to the opposition, calls this a hassle, it is worth noting that during the government of good governance in which he served, 24 families in Lindula were displaced due to a landslide risk in 2017. The foundation stone for their new houses was finally laid only today, 8 years later. These individuals were evacuated in 2017 from the Alrim estate in Lindula Police Division, Nuwara due to a high risk of landslides. For 8 years, previous politicians and 2 successive governments failed to provide housing for this group. Nuwara District MP and Development Committee Chairman Manjula Suraveerarachchi, along with MP Krishnan Kalai Velchi and several others, attended the event.
We
didn't look at anyone's affiliations here. We didn't care if they were CWC, NUW, JVP, UNP or anything else. Did we ask? No. We only checked if their names were on the list of those affected. We only looked to see if these were the 24 people whose homes were destroyed. They are being given houses, and in the future too, we will give what is due to those who deserve it in Nuwara. When we do that, we don't look at politics. Politics is irrelevant to us.
Moving on to news overseas, the Bangladesh Cricket Board has made a formal request to the International Cricket Council match organisers to consider holding all matches involving their country outside of India in the 2026 T20 World Cup. This request has been made in line with Bangladesh's decision to refuse to travel to India to participate in the T20 World Cup.
In the wake of deteriorating political ties between the two nations, Bangladesh has decided to refrain from travelling to India. The situation escalated after the Board of Control for Cricket in India reportedly advised the Kolkata Knight Riders to release Mustafizur Rahman, who was selected to represent the franchise in the Indian Premier League, from the tournament. The Board of Directors of the Bangladesh Cricket Board reached the decision to withhold the team's travel to India following a security assessment by the Bangladeshi government, which cautioned the board regarding the safety and protection of their players. In the upcoming 2026 T20 World Cup, Bangladesh was originally scheduled to play its first 3 matches in Kolkata.
And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of Primetime News. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.